You know the feeling. You read a grim headline about melting starfish or rising temperatures, and your climate anxiety spikes. So you close your eyes, take a deep breath, and grasp on to the knowledge that the solution is out there. Because inspiration is out and decisive action is in. After decades of setting goals, negotiating climate frameworks, we are done talking about the problem. The world is absolutely demanding, not what are we going to do, but how are we going to implement it at scale. That's what I'm talking about today on Environmental with Dandelion. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I'm Bob, your host and the chief cultivator of Dandelion branding. Our mission is to make noise for purpose-driven brands and to push sustainability into mainstream conversations. We do that through telling sustainability stories you might have missed right here on this podcast, Environmental with Dandelion, and we help climate-conscious brands turn their eco-curious audiences into ambassadors for their brands and their mission. Before we jump in, I really just need to remind you here that a lot of algorithms, they devalue conversations around sustainability. We absolutely refuse to fall prey to the green hush. No. So we do need your help to make sure that these stories are heard. You can do that by liking, by subscribing, and by sharing this podcast with all of your eco-curious friends. It really helps, and we really appreciate it. We're going to start off with some good news, because everyone needs good news in the sustainability space in a world that feels grim. All right. In the news, Simon Steele, the UN climate chief, has some unusually positive things to say. I felt like this was great. So while we aren't even close to doing enough things globally, countries around the world are doing more. And he specifically called out China's new dedication to change by saying that 50% of cars produced now are electric, and low carbon exports are booming. He said that we're moving in the right direction, not fast enough, not deep enough, but the progress is showing that something is working. I mean, that's exciting to hear from the UN, right? And something that hits a little closer to home for Dandelion is that our clients over at the Soil Hero Foundations are proving that regenerative agriculture is possible at scale. We can feed the planet and all the people on it at the same time if we shift the way that we farm. So if you are in the Netherlands or Belgium right now, go over to Jumbo Supermarket and get yourself a sack of potatoes from the Van Goede Aarde line. My Dutch isn't great, but you can join our campaign. It's called Tag Your Potato by taking a photo and tagging Soil Heroes on Instagram in your story. Just having a little fun there. But it's really exciting. Regenerative agriculture at scale, really feeding people. Amazing. Finally, in our good news, in October, I went to the Blue Earth Summit. And no, I'm not going to say that I came away inspired. Well, I did, but I didn't just come away inspired. I came away with decisions and ideas and convictions. And everyone that I talked to at the summit kind of feels like inspiration is out and action isn't. So it is a noticeable, and I think it's a really positive shift in how we are experiencing sustainability focused brands. Drop your latest action in the comments and give other people ideas for their next action plan. My latest action was signing a petition to close the national parks. Yes, I signed a petition to close the US national parks. You heard it right. So the last Environmental with Dandelion update on the national parks was in August. This was just after the massive budget cuts and almost 25% reduction in staff, and also the Make America Beautiful Again executive order, which was basically just removing restrictions on how people and companies can use the national parks. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but things are not getting better. I'm laughing, but it's not very funny. As of this recording, the national parks are at least partially open, but they are really heavily impacted by the government shutdown. And of course, they have a contingency plan, just like every other government agency, but it is a bare bones plan. And according to the National Parks Conservation Association, the national parks need to be shut down for as long as the government is. So if it has a gate, if it has a door, it needs to be closed. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I think it's really sad, but it's also the best way to safeguard the parks. So they say this because there was irreparable damage to parks like Big Bend, Joshua Tree, and Death Valley the last time the government was shut down, which was in 2018. There was irreparable damage done because no one was there safeguarding the parks. There is a petition. I go to the notes here and then sign that petition. And you can also donate to the National Parks Conservation Association. There's a brand I love that I want to call attention to here called the Parks Project. They sell absolutely incredible swag, and I actually bought t-shirts for everybody in my family. I love them. Parks Project has donated millions of dollars to parks since their inception in 2017. I have an affiliate link with Parks Project because I have an account with them. You can head over to the Dandelion Branding website where we have the resources article for this podcast and grab that 20% off your purchase and help the parks. Okay, now it's time for the real reason we're all here, which is the expectations we have from COP30. So let's start here with what it is. The official FAQ page says, quote, COP30 is the 30th United Nations Conference of Parties, an annual global meeting where world leaders, scientists, non-governmental organizations, and civil society leaders gather to discuss actions to tackle climate change. It is considered one of the world's key events on the subject. In a nutshell, this is where people come together to make real decisions and come to global agreements about climate change. Cool. If you're here, that pretty much means I don't have to talk about the climate pickle we're in and how every single part of our world and infrastructure has to change towards low emissions, regenerative growth, and more circular planning. The human parts of our world were built on outdated colonial industrial ideas. So yeah, they're extractive, they're exploitative, and they're linear. And now, like that was where it was built, like, hundreds of years ago. And we've just like been on this linear path ever since. It was much simpler then. But now, this world is like a series of nations that are all connected to one another. Yeah, and the through line relates back to like trade, competition, GDP. So making change relies on everyone leveling up together. The whole world has to do it together. And that's what the COPs are actually for, right? Like to make sure that everything is moving up altogether. Okay, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a little disclaimer here because I don't want to talk about the ethics or the nuance of the travel it takes to get there. Because okay, people are flying. Yes, that's a problem. It has been talked about ad nauseum. If we can't get past the fact that people have to travel to get there, then we can never get to the efficacy of the actual event. So I'm going to put a pin in that one. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments because I'm more than happy to have the discussion. I just don't think I need to belabor that here. So this is the 30th one. This is the 30th COP conference from global leaders. And the rhetoric around these that I've heard is generally actually pretty negative because the movement is too slow. And look, I get it, okay? I also think that we are a myopic species. And that's partially because of how short our lives are. Global change is hard. Let me start with this. Global change is hard. And even if there wasn't a ton of money and pressure railing against change, it would still be hard and it would still take time. So, despite people generally shitting on the efficacy of past COPs, there have been a lot of notable events and movement in the past 30 years. So, I'm going to go over a few. COP3 in 1997 came up with the Kyoto Protocol. So this was the first international treaty that set legally binding greenhouse gas reduction targets. And it established a system to monitor that progress. I mean, I'm impressed by that. Like, I'm impressed that we did. I don't know. I'm impressed actually looking into all of the things that we have done on a global scale and agreed to on a global scale for this episode. I'm impressed, but I'll keep going. Then in 2010, it was COP16, and that was in Cancun. That one established a green climate fund for the first time. So that one aimed to mobilize funding for developing countries to support their mitigation and adaptation effort. It basically admitted that developing countries were already seeing issues with climate change. At COP17 in 2011, the Durban platform launched a new negotiation process to develop legal agreement that would be applicable to everybody, including major emitters that were not interested in joining the conversation. Like at that point, China and India. Can I just point out that in 2011, China and India were a really big issue, and they were basically refusing to join this conversation up until actually pretty recently. But right now, the UN climate chief is openly saying that China is doing a great job at taking steps and making change while simultaneously inviting everybody except the US president to join in negotiations here. I'll just point that out. I'll just leave that. I'll leave that on the table right there. In 2013 in Warsaw, this established the first formal mechanism to address loss and damage from climate change. And the Paris Agreements, which is in the news a lot, came from COP21, which was in 2015. So this brought all the nations together for the first time in a common cause to combat climate change on a long-term basis with regular reporting and updates. So I will say, yes, this is COP30. This is the 30th year we've been doing this, but the world didn't even agree until 10 years ago that climate change is something that needed to be fought. I think we're doing all right, guys. In 2021, Glasgow Climate Pact at COP26 was the first time there was an agreement to explicitly call out unabated coal usage, which has been on a steady decline ever since. And in the first half of 2025, renewable energies were used at a higher rate than coal, like a much higher rate than coal for energy. So I do think we're seeing action based on these COPs. And this is just like 6 events, right? The other one, these are the 6 big events, and the other COPs were essentially used at laying groundwork for current and future agreements, which I personally feel like is fine, because imagine if there had been a new agreement every year. That would be really stressful and really overwhelming. Now, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here against the folks who are just railing against the work that the COPs have and the UN have really done. But imagine if every year there was a new agreement. And that's just not very long for a country to make a change. And like, leaders need to make incremental changes when it comes to policy, not these big sweeping changes. Look at what's happening in the US right now. Yes, it's moving in the opposite direction. Yes, the changes themselves are hurting people, but also I want to call attention to the fact that the transition and the changes themselves, like the shifts themselves, are putting immense pressure on people in the USA and globally. So I do think incremental changes are necessary when we're talking about changing every single part of the infrastructure we've built in the entire world. Just my 2 cents there. And you're here on my podcast, so, you know. Okay, that said, okay, I will say, okay. But all of that was true. And also, it's been a while since we got something really serious from a COP. The Paris Agreement planning and frameworks and the rule book has taken a long time to solidify, and that happened last time. So that is set. And now the science is saying that we're going to hit above 1.5 degrees before the end of the decade. So what is this COP about? What is it for? What do we expect from it? Okay, let's go. COP30, for when it's being held in Belém, sorry if I'm not saying that right, the capital and largest city of the state of Para in the north of Brazil. The city is part of a critical ecosystem which is on the front line of climate change, which essentially just like puts this in the face of all the people. Like, they walk outside and they're at the front line of climate change. They can see the impacts of it. I don't know if it's like, they walk out of the conference hall and like there's the impacts of climate change. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know that much about the event hall. Anyway, it does. So this pushes people to directly face the impact of climate change on the Amazon and in the global south generally. Belém is an old city, and it was a Portuguese colony in the 1600s, and it has been used as a landing place, I would say, for a mix of Brazilian culture and colonization ever since. Like, in looking into this city, and please correct me if I'm wrong, put your thoughts in the comments. In looking into the city, I do see like a really interesting interwoven mix between the culture and colonization here that you don't really see very often, at least in the US where I'm from. So this is a large city and it hosts events and festivals year round. So it does have the infrastructure to support an event like this. And I always look for that when I see big events like this, because at least they didn't go the route of the Olympics, and create a massive resource suck for like a single event. I feel like that would be even worse than everyone flying there. Actually, if you want me to talk about the Olympics in a future episode, drop that in the comments, because I find the Olympics to be really interesting, and they're definitely not sustainable. And maybe that's changed. I could do some research on that. Anyway, right now, it is early November. We are in what was what is called the pre-session period of COP30, which is the 3rd to the 9th of November. It is about facilitative working groups and coordination meetings. So folks are like getting ready. And now the actual conference is from the 10th to the 21st. And I'm not going to share all the themes and all the days here because you can find that schedule super easily, and the themes and topics in the like overview schedule, it can feel really, really overwhelming. What I will say is that while the thematic days are very mega, they cover topics from health to justice to energy. They're also actually really thoughtfully planned out, and there's a lot of time for discussion and negotiation. Now, I'm going to take that overwhelm as a reminder that we need to change everything we do. Everything we do. Every part of our infrastructure and culture needs attention and transformation. In this planning, though, I find it interesting because you can see how different voices have actually been heard. So in previous years, the COPs were criticized for being whitewashed, for not hearing or discussing the impacts to sensitive places, classes, or groups of people. But looking at the overview schedule and listening to the action agenda did tell me that folks planning the COP have been listening and taking in that feedback. And okay, so I'm definitely a little jaded here because we see so much corruption and blatant disregard and greenwashing in the world right now, but I am actively looking for it in the context of the COPs, and I'm really not seeing it, at least not intentional. Okay, is it perfect? No, of course not. Of course not. Our whole infrastructure, our whole society was built on a colonial, extractive, and exploitive venture in the world, right? It's being held at a colonial city. So it's not perfect, but I am pleasantly surprised at the care and consideration and understanding and understanding here. I don't know if I'm going to say the same thing in December. I'm going to talk about how that shakes out then. I'm going to put another pin here, and I will let you know if that kind of, if it worked that way, right? Great. What do we actually expect from this COP? Okay. For one, it's a big year. This is the last time we'll have the global stocktake, which is the global assessment on where we are with climate action generally, before we're expected to go above 1.5 degrees Celsius in global warming. Wild. It's also the first COP we've had since the Paris Agreement rulebook and roadmap were finalized. So it's a big one. And it's going to place emphasis on implementation, which, like I said, inspiration is out, action is in. And that feeling is translating to the COPs too. All that criticism in the talk, no action for the past couple of years has to end right now, because this is time for action at scale. I did watch the UN action agenda, and something I really liked, a quote that I really liked from them, was them saying, we're not bringing in anything new. We are bringing in how. From what I can see, this COP is the beginning of country leaders, nonprofits, businesses, and activists setting aside their agendas and working to connect climate action to real lives. This is the first time this has happened at a COP. That's awesome. But the thing is, it's still a conference. So they're still talking about creating frameworks and how to accelerate implementation. And while I love that, I'm excited by that, I'm thinking back to the Blue Earth Summit. I'm thinking back to 1% for the Planet Global Summit. That's been, this stuff has been going on for years. So I'm thinking about people, nonprofits, creatives, business owners, investors, all of these groups of people who have already been doing this for years. They've already been wondering about scale and messaging, right? Like, we're already there. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that this catches it up. And honestly, I can't really be that salty because seeing sustainability in mainstream conversations is the mission we have here, right? So, okay, that's where we're at. But I'm calling this right now because now it's going to go through the COP, which means we're going to see conversations happening at a very high level that have been happening, bubbling in the sustainability industry for a long time. So I'm going to predict both a wave of greenwashing because people are going to be inspired, intentional maybe, I don't know, but a wave of greenwashing and then legislation against greenwashing that actually goes a little too far, which is going to lead to like a little bit of green hushing. That's my prediction. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So aside from implementation conversations, there's so much talk around the energy transition. And they're really focused on this just transition, which is a framework that ensures that the shift away from fossil fuels is fair and inclusive with a focus on job creation and community support. I love that. If you have watched the EPA episode, or really any episode where we talked about Greenpeace and the Dakota Access Pipeline, you know how I feel about the oil people, which in a nutshell is that I don't think they have made it safe or fair for people anywhere in the world. And while I would love to uphold the higher ground here, the right thing to do is leave them behind while we help people and the planet get out from under their thumb. Yeah, that's what, okay, I'm gonna leave that there. And one way to do that is to ensure climate finance, which is another really big topic at this COP. Climate finance is and will continue to be a massive topic for the foreseeable future here. And I think that there just aren't enough people educated in what that even means, myself included. Like, what will it take to fund the transition to a more sustainable future? Yeah, the education around this needs to change. And I'm actually going to shout out the Green program here because they teach people about climate finance in Indonesia every single year. Amazing. Highly recommend. Check out my show notes and I will link to the Green program. Other things I want to see at this COP is more conversation and energy around conservation and the importance of just leaving things alone. Like, leave it alone. There is so much emphasis on climate technology and all the energy stuff, but like, we are approaching the tipping points for more and more sensitive ecosystems. And we need to learn how to just like let it heal or learn how to protect nature and especially entrust and support Indigenous peoples to take care of their own lands. And this is a massive paradigm shift because I think in essence, humans are doers. We want to take an action and we want to see the results basically immediately, but that just isn't how nature works. That's kind of how we got into this situation that we're in right now, right? So appreciating that and working with nature's optimal systems will always be the best way for us to approach climate and climate change and the safety of our species and a lot of other species on our planet. Whew. All right, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, from scalable success of regenerative agriculture to the absolute urgency of taking decisive action. We cannot be salty about this process. We have to ensure that the action at the top reflects the conviction that we hold right here, right between me and you through the screen. Your action, whether it's supporting organizations through tagging your potato or signing a petition to protect a national park, or simply choosing to invest in companies that are doing the real work, is how you can help ensure the global transition actually happens. And one action you can take right now is liking this episode, if you liked it. only if you liked it. We're honest here. And share it, because it only takes one little wonder to become eco-curious. Until then, do not stop paying attention, and I will see you next time on Environmental with Dandelion.